record. Good evening, everybody. This is going to be our last RAG talk in the current seminar series for this this summer. And it follows up very well for last week with John Cox's wonderful demonstration of the great year, the lunar standstill alignments on the Maltese temples, which of course were Neolithic. Today we're switching back to the Paleolithic with lunar timekeeping in Upper Paleolithic cave art with Bernie Taylor. Bernie is a naturalist and an archaeoastronomer, investigating the emergence of human creativity in relation to Upper Paleolithic rock art, awareness of the natural world in humans, the human species, and their ancestors. So please, Bernie, do.
Thank you, Camilla.
Thank you.
And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to share screen. I'm going to go to entire screen. And then I'm going to pick up my PowerPoint. And I'm going to go to current slide. And I'm going to hide the share screen thing. And can you now see my cover screen?
Brilliant.
So this is the first time I've actually got it correct out of the many presentations I've done. And Camille, thank you for the introduction. And yes, I'm a naturalist. How I came into this space entirely by accident. And we're going to take a journey today. And this is really not just the journey of Upper Paleolithic man, who we are, but rather my story, going back to about 2000. And you're going to see images how I came to fall into this space, and ultimately these other areas that you've seen me in videos. So thousands of sequential marks were painted and engraved on portable objects in cave walls during the Upper Paleolithic. What were the intentions of the artists? Could these marks have projected their perceptions of time and space? In this presentation, we will explore these questions and possibly determine if any of the marks are a form of scientific notation. My name is Bernie Taylor, and my research explores a deep root to mankind's creative capacity by looking at how hunter-gatherers and ancient peoples viewed their cosmoscape through the study of Upper Paleolithic cave art. Oops, I'm sorry. Sorry. Uh-oh. I made a boo-boo. Sorry about that. So I actually didn't. I passed on my recording, not my. So anyway, so this is my webpage, Archaeastronomy, many videos and so forth. And we're going to travel. Most of the images we're going to talk about today are in the Lascaux cave in the Dourdan region of France, so Magdalenian, about 17,000 years ago. And you have seen all these images before in different places. We're also going to drop into this image that came from the BBC about this possible Orion and Taurus interpretation on the panel of the bowls as well. So that's the hook. Now, most people in this area of Upper Paleolithic cave art, or I should say, time factoring in Upper Paleolithic cave art, were influenced by Alexander Marshak. Marshak was a science writer who became a Paleolithic archaeologist. He was working on a book contract about how mankind came to find our way to the moon. And he stumbled upon these images. And Marshak said that there is a suddenliness to how we found the lunar counts. So he would look back in history of astronomy books or history of culture, and he'd say, well, all of a sudden we had the moons. All of a sudden we had astronomy. And Marshak argued that most of these images, most of these objects with the marks on them, should have come from earlier societies, as opposed to all the suddenlies that happen. And I'm just flipping through some images that Marshak used. Now, Marshak remains a controversial read. Okay, he remains a controversial read because he never established what is the connection between the notches and the marks on these objects in the cave walls with lunar calendars. He said the numbers work out sequences such as lunar calendars, and they appear to be sequenced with the sun. But what is the meaning of it all? What's it all about, Alfie? And Marshak never figured that out. Marshak was brilliant, but remember, his space was looking at the history of science. It was not trying to figure out what were the life history strategies of now extinct animals. I entered the space about 2000 in the concept that I call biological time. And I proposed, which is not an original idea, as I learned later, that all animals are timed, including us. And we're less so timed than we were in the past because we're not directly influenced by the sun and the moon and perhaps navigate by the stars. But all animals in the natural world have to know when and where they're going to do things. In case a salmon needs to know when to spawn. The salmon can't all follow one smart salmon. It's not possible to happen. And so I was working on this concept from the perspective of salmonids, steelhead trout, and coho and Chinook salmon in the Pacific Northwest. And I was actually doing field surveys. I was being helped by the Oregon Fish and Wildlife Department as well as Washington as well. And what we're looking at this graph, and we're only going to have a few graphs, is the upstream migration of steelhead trout, which is a salmonid, on a river in Washington, state of Washington, near to where I live. And we can see that the salmon, they migrate during the dark of the nights and they slow down during the full moon nights. Okay. Interesting observation. Well, one could say that perhaps Stonehenge was marking this sort of concept way back when, because the Hampshire Avon, of course, goes near to Stonehenge, and there's been some question about what exactly it meant. Okay, so we have another salmon. This is adults on their spawning beds on another river near to where I live in Oregon. And we can see that the peak of the counts were all around the full moon. Now, the researchers going out all those years, they weren't going out by the moon, they were going out by the weeks. And so if they had went out on new moon, full moon, you'd have a line that went straight up at the full moon, or all these little stars would go up at the full moon. And so this was done, going out every Monday or every Tuesday, and I actually went on one of these counts and saw how they did it. It's really important when you collect data is how do people collect it? What is the methodology? And this is salmon juveniles going downstream out to the ocean. And again, we can see that they travel during the dark of the night and they slow down the full moon nights. And what's happening is that the salmon, they wake up when it's dark and they go to sleep in a way when the light is on. So it's a predator avoidance strategy, whereas we are just the opposite. If you take a plane up to Norway this time of year, you're going to get off the plane and it's going to be light out in the evening, and you're going to be up partying the first night, and you may be up partying the second night, and then you're just going to conk out. But we're tied through our biological clocks in similar ways to the salmon, except we fall asleep at night or in the darkness and they wake up. Okay. And the question can be, well, is this just a salmon thing? Or is it a salmon thing? Is these salmon came out of the ocean, in this case, the Pacific Ocean? Well, there's research done at Oregon State University, which is also near to me, just so happens to be by the recently deceased Norm Anderson, who was an aquatic entomologist. And years ago, he had a paper published in Nature, and he looked at the downstream migration of invertebrates in rivers. And of course, it's a significant difference between the dark nights and the full moon nights, as we saw with the salmon. So the salmon are not being trained by the tides in the ocean, but rather it's biological clocks by the light and the darkness that help them to avoid predators and capture their prey, which would be, in this case, aquatic invertebrates. I met Norm Anderson, interviewed him back in 2002 or so. He's a really nice guy, and we became friends. My daughter is graduating from Oregon State this Friday, so there's a lot happens in Oregon. This is an image of giant honeybees, and this, I believe, this work was done in India, and we can see that there's a relationship between the light and the darkness of the moon and the foraging behavior of giant honeybees. And we can see that during the let's say the waning gibbous, or this sort of past the full moon, 5 or 6 days past the full moon, there's a lot more foraging behavior. And this is not possible anywhere and all the time, because honeybees are highly dependent on temperature. And so honeybees today, it's where I live, we have honeybees on our place. And the honeybees, they're in by 9:30, 10 o'clock, because it gets too cold, even in this time of year, June. But what happens when you have honeybees is that you have the potential for pollination to influence crops, and you potentially could have a lunar strategy of crops. And these are some of my honeybees, or our honeybees, I should say. And we have about 3,000 honeybees in our hive, and we'll produce 50 to 60 pounds of honey. And back when I was working in the field with the Oregon Fish Wildlife Department, I went out and did field surveys. And this is a field survey of the juvenile salmon in the springtime are being swimming down the stream. They get caught up in this contraption, or this sort of it's like a mechanical net. And in the morning, they would take out the salmon juveniles and count them in a bucket. And this became part of the work for the graphs that you saw earlier for the downstream salmon. So I go way back on this stuff. And this was about 2000. And my question became, well, who else knew this? I mean, this is kind of a basic life skill that definitely wasn't known in the salmon biology community when I was working on this. And when I give presentations, they said, the moon, are you crazy? All that sort of stuff. And you've all heard the story before. Well, the Thompson Indians of British Columbia, which is about maybe 400 miles north of me, just over the Washington border in the Pacific Northwest, had a calendar, as documented by James Teat, who was an ethnographer at the turn of the last century. And we can see at the bottom of the calendar in red the moon of the first sockeye run and the moon of the silver salmon. So the Thompson Indians had this in their calendars, and calendars that we can still retrieve till today. Okay. We can go to the France, 17,000 years ago, and we can look at the Arbre du Poisson. I probably haven't pronounced that correctly. And above the Arbre du Poisson, we have, on this panel, we have a kite salmon. The kite is that hook in its mouth. And we see above it is fat salmon. Above it, we have 13 marks in these standing rectangular engravings. And if we counted from the full moon, or the first visible moon, first visible moon or the first crescent moon, you counted 13 days, you would be at the full moon. At the same time that we have the coho salmon on the rivers spawning. And I would suggest that this was actually this image is outside of a pool where the salmon congregated and spawned. Salmon can't think to spawn at a certain time. They have to be cued by other signals, and I would suggest that it's both the sun and the moon. Okay. Well, going back to the Thompson Indian lunar calendar, there's more elements to it. And one of the issues that I had, or I was actually trying to figure out, was how do you know which new moon or which full moon this biological activity would happen with the salmon? Because it could be, I didn't know if the spawning was in December, the first full moon after December 1st, or the first full moon after December 3rd, because it makes a difference. Well, the Thompson had a way of doing this, and what they did was they reset the calendar by the deer rut. So the deer rut would started the lunar calendar for the following year, because the deer rut happened in the autumn or the late autumn. And then they sequenced to when the bucks shed their antlers and the does became lean. And the bucks shed their antlers is also measurable. When I did my book, Biological Time, back in 2004, I borrowed data of antler sheds. And in fact, you can predict the antler sheds based on the cycle of the moon. And of course, they have the moon when the deer drop their young later down the road, later in their year. And this fills out the year for the Thompson Indians. Now, the Thompson Indians harvested and captured many other plants and animals, but these were the key ones that they had in their calendars that set them in motion to go to different places at different times where they had those other ones. And we can see a picture of the Thompson Indians to the viewer's far left. This is from Wikipedia, and we can see what a black-tailed deer looks like. And this would be a black-tailed deer. We see We see his antlers in fall condition, and he's fairly heavy. So this is not one that's about to drop his antlers in the late fall, or actually early spring. Now I looked at many raw data sources, and I worked out graphs just as you saw previously. But since then, there's actually been a lot of work done by many organizations, and the U.S. Geological Survey released a report, Nocturnal Movements of Desert Bighorn Sheep in the Muddy Mountains of Nevada. And the movement distance were greatest when the sheep were the moon was brightest. Okay. Well, there's a problem with all this. And this is the problem I believe has plagued people throughout time, and that Thomson sort of figured out. There's 365 plus days in a solar year and 29 and a half days in a lunar cycle of light and darkness. 12 times 29 and a half is 11 days short of 365. And so the moon, the full moon, could be in January 1st, January 11th one year, be January 1st the following year, or is January 12th one year, January 1st the next year. And so the moon is out of sync with the sun, which everybody in this presentation, in this group today, knows. This is basic lunar cycle. But people outside of the circle have no recognition of that concept. It's a thing. And what I was trying to figure out was, if the animal moves back and forth in time, or at critical events such as the dropping of the young, which you have a delayed mortality that you'll see it later in life, that you'll see a smaller population. And if in most cases, if an animal drops too early, or in the case of a deer, they'll be in harsher winters, and they drop too late, they won't be able to have time to get up and go. So there's like a magic spot between that from one year to the next. And so one should be able, by this biological time lunar slower shift, one should be able to predict the populations of animals. I mean, it makes complete sense. And I worked on that for years. And I was never able to either, number one, find a data set that I could prove it out, or it's not possible. Maybe it just isn't possible. And if it was possible and I had figured out, I would have been visiting Stockholm, because it would have been a universal pattern or formula to determine population growth of all animals in the natural world. Well, we can go back to Lascaux Cave and kind of see what they knew. And we can see we see the scene of red deer crossing a stream. The bottom one down to the viewer's left is falling into a pool, and we kind of count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's 8 there. And maybe these are 8 lunations, 7 or 8 lunations traveling from a specific point in time where these red deer are crossing a stream by the Lascaux Cave, and the Vizier River runs right by it, just as you saw with the salmon at the Aber du Poisson. So maybe there's a connection in the same way that the Thompson Indians did. Okay. And we're going to go to another animal called the black stag, and it has, black stag is probably a good word, because the antlers look something like a red deer and something like a now extinct megaloceros. And we can see the black stag has his neck arched, and he's blowing out something in front of him, and we count the dots below him, and everybody has seen this image before. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, leading to a box. And again, it's reminiscent of the Aber du Poisson salmon, where you have that 13 mark. Okay. Well, this black stag also looks like this roaring deer. And we can see the antlers are the neck is up, and that irregularity to the viewer's left in front of the skull black stag looks an awful like bellowing in the morning and into the cool air. So what we're looking at is not just a red deer, these stags in autumn condition, but they are mating autumn stags. They're calling out to the cows, the females, to bring them in to rut. And if I was an Upper Paleolithic cave artist and went into these caves, I would have not just looked at the images, but perhaps I would have even roared. I would have given a good bellow and to call to this animal, and that might have been the bellow itself might have been the word for the red deer in this condition. Okay. And there's counting to the full moon. 13 to the full moon is not unique. The top image to the top right over here, we see an image from the Columbia Basin, of course, again near to where I live. A lot seems to happen around here. And on the back, you have 13 marks on the back of it of this deer or elk that are raised, and we have a hunter hunting it during this full moon period. It's very easy to hunt a deer or an elk when they're rutting, because you can call them in, challenge them with a bellow, or you can use a female sound as to say, come over here, check me out. This one at the bottom here is called the major stag, and again 13 marks on the back, and that lead to the sort of box here. And this is at the Lascaux cave. We're talking again about 13 years ago. I'm sorry, 13 days of lunation. And I probably had this one published back in 2007 in the Griffith Observer, which is a kind of archaeoastronomy type of journal. Okay. Again, we have we can count on this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 or so, and leads to a box, and it continues on. And we're looking at a very pregnant mare. So it's telling us something happened later after this perhaps full moon period. Okay, we can go to the rutting wildebeest in Africa, and it's really cool because a lot of data on it, and the blue wildebeest, the start of mating is at the full moon. And this was done over multiple years. This was published in Nature by Anthony Sinclair of the University of British Columbia, who I've never connected with. And what they did was they went out in the field and they looked at the juveniles that had dropped, and they back calculated to when the rut would start. So they all didn't start at the rut or the mating started at the full moon, and it continued on after that. If you want to take a tour in Africa to see the blue wildebeest migration, going across the river, falling in the river, eaten by crocodiles, all that sort of stuff, and you say, I want to go on, November or whatever, they're going to look at their lunar calendar, the travel agents in South Africa or in Africa, and they're going to say, it's better that you go, 7 lunar days later, because then you get more action to what you're looking for. And of course, I think Chris Knight had referred to this just before we started, when humans are hunted. That was a National Geographic, and this particular work showed that there's a relationship between when humans are hunted and when the animals or the big cats are on the prowl. And what is it that the big cats, the lions, are doing what they do naturally, and it just so happens that we are in the way of that. And so the big cats know when to hunt, where to be most successful. And we've more recently learned, or as Western people more recently learned, that indigenous people in Africa already knew this, is that you stay out during certain periods of light and darkness of both the sun and the moon. And someone who I'd worked with years ago, who wrote a book about African lions, George Schaller, he said that it just wasn't the moon, but if the big cats would sort of wake up when you got some really dark clouds coming over as well, so the big cats couldn't tell whether it was the moon or some dark storm clouds to shift their clock. And we can even see a blue wildebeest, 2 weeks after this, and that the wildebeest, the juvenile, is protecting from the lions, hyenas, and other carnivores. But even a few weeks later, under the full moon, obviously because it's a full moon shot, the animals, because they fell into the dark moon, and they started dark moon, so it's 2 weeks later, they were still vulnerable, and they're obviously between the legs of the other blue wildebeest, but this is an animal that isn't going to run very far or very fast if lions attack. We're now going to go to Siberia and look at the Chukchi, and Chukchi means rich. In the Chukchi language, it means rich in reindeer, and that's just about most of what people know about the Chukchi. And the entire calendar of the Chukchi is lunar, and it's about the reindeer. So we have the old buck moon, the cold udder moon, the genuine udder moon, the calving moon, important calving moon. The Chukchi don't live by a lunar calendar. The reindeer live by a lunar calendar. The Chukchi live by the reindeer. So I would say that long time ago, before we actually herded animals, because I'm not convinced that the Chukchi are really herding animals. I believe that they're literally following the animals. And so a long, long time ago, before we were pastoral herders, we probably followed the animals. We followed them across the plains, we followed them up and down mountains, and some days, eventually some of them became sort of more inclined to hang out with us for longer periods of time. And then we said, well, now they're domesticated. But we probably followed the animals, or lived in the rhythms of the animals, just as the Chukchi did today to the present. And this calendar goes back to 1904 by Boragas, who was at Waldemar, who was a very famous ethnologist. Okay, so we go to the human menstrual cycle, and what's so-called the McClintock effect. And there's been studies that, or I should say, before there were studies, there was common knowledge among women in dormitories, prisons, convents, and such places where there were only women lived and worked close together, that their menstrual cycles would synchronize, and this was called the McClintock effect. This was published, back in many journals over long periods of time, and what McClintock found in a study, that if she shared the pheromones from one woman to other women, they would move towards her, they would synchronize towards her. And this is a thing. This is based on the presentations such as by Ian and Camilla. And this is what you're talking about. This is that concept. Well, animals with menstrual cycles is fairly rare on planet Earth. In fact, it's primates, it's a few bats, and the elephant shrew. So, I mean, if you throw these all together, you're probably talking about 30 to 40 animals. Okay, maybe 50. That's not a very big number. Okay. It's very rare to have a menstrual cycle. Okay, and there's a case with owl monkeys that's been documented, but there's not a lot of studies on this concept of primates with the moon and how how it works. Okay, well, this is a very interesting effect. So there's very few animals on planet Earth that have this concept. And this concept is tied around the relationship between the sun and the moon. And most primates, don't have a 29.5-day lunar cycle, whereas we're very close to it as Homo sapiens. Chimpanzees are about 36 days. The gorillas and orangutan are very close to us. So what would happen if we did not have a way to consciously, through the moon, be able to time ourselves with the animals? Well, we would be like the Chukchi. We'd be following around the herds of animals. But what we couldn't do is we couldn't have a lunar calendar such as the Thompson Indians, where they went from one lunation to another to be in the right places at the right times to intercept and be most profitably harvest their food sources. Okay. Well, what would happen? And this time in 29.5 days is respective of the current relationship between our sun and our moon, or is it Earth and our moon? What would happen if it was our moon was further away, such as we'd have a 40-day or 50-day lunar cycle? Well, then we would have to have a different time period, and we have to adjust to that if it was even possible. And I would say that if this is how we consciously came to tell time through the moon and then through the sun and the stars, in other galaxies and other solar systems, this might not be possible, because to consciously tell time, you'd have to have the same relationship. And it's almost an accident for us, because primates and us, and we haven't been around for that long in the history of this planet. And so it's almost as if it's an accidental circumstance that created this concept. And so, we look at our moon in the far off distance. It's moving further away. And I'm convinced that if we live on this planet for as many millions of years, it would make any difference. We will evolve to that. But we had to first fall within the window to be able for all this to happen. So now we're going to go to the skull cave, and we're going to look at what we've learned so far. And my suggestion is that the mare or the horse is the dominant animal within the Magdalenians in France. And what we have in this image is we have a very pregnant mare. She's about to drop, and we find this grid pattern over her head. And she's about to drop, which would be just about a few days after the vernal equinox as we see the world right now. So we're talking if we go along with the Serengeti wildebeest, it would be the first new moon after the vernal equinox that she'd be dropping, and I would say that's indicated by this box here. And then we have two lunate, so this would be the vernal equinox will be here. Then we have the first lunation, and we have the second lunation, and we have the third lunation. And I would suggest that that is the calendar that depicts this pregnant mare. Okay. And to kind of get into the life history strategy of horses, they have a 336-day or 11.4 lunation gestation period, whereby if a mare becomes pregnant in May, will drop her foal in approximately mid-April of the next year. Okay, and mares that come into heat, they'll come into heat a week after foaling, so they start the cycle over again. And if anybody here has horses, they know that horses will drop in June and they'll drop in July. But we're talking about the start of the calendar in the same way that these indigenous calendars talk about the first dropping of the young, the first arrival of the salmon. And so I would say that the calendar is primarily based on the mare. I have a friend here in Oregon. Lots of things happen in Oregon, as you're learning. And my friend has more than 300 llamas. The last I heard, he had like 360. And he originally bought llamas so he could go backpacking with his kids. So he bought, one. And then he realized you need 2 or 3 to actually pack some serious gear into the woods. And ultimately, they started breeding, and he had lots of llamas, more llamas than he ever could have imagined. And there was one day, or actually one night, that one of his ranch hands left the light on in the barn because they put the llamas that were about to drop in the barn for safety. And she didn't drop. And whereas what always happened, what they knew was that that at nighttime, the llamas drop their young in the same way as we're finding with the Serengeti, the wildebeest. And so they created the dark of the moon, but someone made a mistake, they left the light on. And they thought about this for a while and said, this is actually a pretty good thing, because they were waking up every night between 11 and 2 in the morning when a llama calf dropped to tend to her needs. So they did, so going forward, so they kept the light on. Oops. Hang on a second, sorry. They kept the light on. They kept the light on all of the time. And so they'd have an equal number of calves dropping during the day as during the night, which became more, better living for human beings. And of course, there was no predation issue with the llamas. Okay. And so we'll go back to this panel again, and this concept, and I'm saying that 1Y is the dropping of the young, and then the second and third lunation. Okay, very similar to the concept of the other animals that we're seeing, so that they continued on. Okay. So the Yakut, who live in what we call Siberia today, have a remnants of lunar calendar, which they had in 1933, and Johansson recorded. And what they retained was the fish spawning, which started the calendar, the month of pine, and the foal he catches. And so the Yakut, they're known by being horse people, just as the Chukchi or reindeer people. It's like their thing, the Yakut, and they mark this all on their calendar. We can go from June, July, August, September, all around the year to their month when in the spring, April, roughly April, but it's really it's going to be the dark moon after the vernal equinox. So we're going to go back to the Lascaux Cave again, and we're going to look at 2 ibex. The one to the viewers right over here is pregnant, and this one is a male, and she's very pregnant. She's about to drop. And on this image here, you can see the little mark. You can see the little mark over here again. And earlier, I presented the mountain goats. The mountain goats, the lunar migration for the USGS, that they migrate during the light of the night, so they are at lunar times. Okay. With a 160-day or 5.6 lunar gestation period, a female that becomes pregnant in the month of December will drop her kids in our month of May and then next year. So it'll become the lunation after the dropping of the young, the first dropping of the young for the deer. And that's what alpine ibex actually look like. Okay, so if we go back to our calendar, and I was saying that the first lunation here is when horses would drop, the mares drop the young. Well, I'm going to say the second lunation is when the ibex drop their young, okay, and which would be their kids. And some people don't like the word to call ibex kids because it's like making them like our kids, human kids, but they are in fact called kids. So 2y would become the second lunation when they drop their young, the second lunation after the vernal equinox, or the lunation after the pregnant mares first drop their young. Okay, we'll go back to look at another image in the same chamber of Lascaux. It's called the we see an oryx. An oryx is with an S at the end, even if it's just one oryx. And what we see is the oryx connected to this box. We see her legs splayed forward. We see her kind of legs underneath. We can see the rumen inside. The rumen is where they sort of digest the food. And if you've ever taken down a big animal, you will, a big cow or something like that, or clean it, you'll find that it's just full of grass and stuff. This whole area here. And perhaps this could be some of the internal channels. She's dropping out her young. And as we see with this one, this animal, this is a very difficult image to find of a cow or dropping her young, because most of these are happening at nighttime. They probably either induced this cow, or they left the light on at night in the where the animal was, and so dropped her in the day or dropped her at night. But I actually pulled this from a YouTube video. I couldn't find this as an image anywhere else. And that would suggest that this is the same relationship. She's got her legs behind. So actually she's about to drop, and this one she is dropping her young, her calf. Okay. And so the 285 or 9.6 day lunar gestation period, a female oryx that becomes pregnant in September, October would drop her calf in June and July of the next year. And so I would say that this is, we're going to say, the first lunation after the vernal equinox, the second lunation, this is the mare, this is the ibex, and this would be the oryx as the third and the fourth. And so this chamber in the axial gallery of Lascaux is a chamber of the female biological life of the animals. So one could say that it's sort of matriarchal. In fact, you could say all this is matriarchal because the calendar is being driven by the females of the species, just as it is with the Thomson and other calendars. So yes, they had the Thomson had the dropping of the antlers, but it's predominantly being driven by the dropping of the young. So we were always matriarchal in a way. Okay. Now we're going to go to this image here, which is in the Hall of the Bulls at Lascaux. And this came from the BBC, and this is often categorized as the first constellation shown in cave art. It's not. And I'm going to show you a few things because they tie into what we've just done. First of all, the so-called belt of Orion has 4 stars, not 3, which they put here. And the Pleiades they have 6 here, but there was actually 7 easily visible at this time. So that's not that. But we also have 4. We probably have a 5 here, and we have a 6. So what we do have is we have a moving along of lunations. And just to show again, the 3 belt of Orion, there's 4. It doesn't really work, but it's all very interesting. And what you got to be very careful when you look at images from people who study Upper Paleolithic cave art is they crop the images. It's a thing. And if they don't crop it, the newspaper is going to crop it. And so the first one we saw that was allegedly this belt of Orion is actually on the back of another oryx that have her legs splayed forwards, and she doesn't look she doesn't look real happy. I would say that this oryx is actually dropping her young in the 4th lunation after the vernal equinox. And then we have a very clever scene. This is a male. This one here is a male, and I would say that 5. So it was 5, it was a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So actually we have 6 here. So this would be 6 after lunation at the vernal equinox would be the mating of the male to the female. And so this is 2 different periods of time, but the artist sort of gives the impression that the male is moving towards the female. So this is he's overlapped image to make them 2 different points of time, but have the second one here as this in the 6th lunation to be the the second act of sorts. And of course, there's another oryx down here that doesn't appear to have anything to do with these two. And so we look at this, of course, as this stellar interpretation of all this. You got to be careful what you look at and what people say. Okay. And so again, we have this displayed legs forwards, the female. This one is probably actually dropping her young, which this one is about to drop her young. Okay. Okay. And this stellar work here came from a friend of mine, Chantal. And Chantal had a movie or documentary that was in multiple languages. You can find it. And these are kind of the images that she had in the movie. Well, Chantal left this after reading my book, Biological Time, back in, she read it in about 2006 or 2007, and she migrated into the lunar work and with animals, and she does a much better job at lunar work than I do, because she's a much better astronomer. Okay, so we have these three animals, these three females in the same chamber of the Lascaux cave, and we have a pregnant mare, the pregnant ibex, and the birthing oryx. Okay, well, I would suggest there's another step to this, and that these are actually part of a sign language. And there's a peculiarity in the Lascaux cave is that there are absolutely no handprints, which people interpret as signs, whereas in other caves there's hundreds of handprints or stenciled hands in different ways. And I would suggest that the dropping of the young is marked there with that one, mark one there, and drops it with these two here, becomes the symbol of the dropping of the young. And that they don't use the fingers. So this finger's down because they don't use it. This finger's down because they don't use it, and they use all the fingers. So you use just as many fingers in the hand to be able to move them across to characterize the shape of the animal. In this case, it would be the upper ears or horns of the animal. Okay, and this is kind of what it would look like. Now, the San Bushmen, back to Africa, we're on this worldwide journey. Their hand signs or hand gestures are based on the head, the ears, the horns, that sort of thing. So this is not a new idea. In fact, André Louis-Gorham, absolutely brilliant French anthropologist, studied this question. And what he did, he studied it differently from mine, is he said that if Lascaux doesn't have, he counted, let's say, all the animals in Lascaux cave and said most of them are females, then the most common hands or assortment of fingers or stenciled hands in other caves would most likely represent a mare or horse. And the problem with that idea was the most popular one is going to be 5. This is going to be a full hand, which could represent a lot of things, including just, hi, I'm here, this is my hand. So that was the problem with that. But what he did find is that his ibex was the same. His ibex is the same as mine, and his so this would be the ibex, and his bison, because he didn't do oryx. His bison were like this, which is the same as my oryx, and so there's some parallel, but I can't go with his stuff because I'm not convinced that every one of these is a horse. Okay, so there's a chimpanzee in the United States that came from Africa, and the chimpanzee's name was Washoe. And the chimpanzee was recruited as sort of like a race to space. And Washoe learned hundreds of gestures of American Sign Language. Washoe also taught her juvenile, the sign language. And then the other chimpanzees in the group, they learned from her, but they also learned unique combinations of putting these gestures together. In the wild, if there is such a thing as the wild, there's chimpanzees and bonobos have 30 or 40 gestures to communicate. So hand gestures and sign language are not a big trick to the imagination. And I studied trying to figure out how this all works. I studied American Indian Sign Language. And we can see that there's differences between them. This is just for the horse. There's 4 different ways to look at the horse. The two the viewers left are one-handed, of course, and the other are two-handed. And so I don't believe that all these proposed hand gestures in all these caves are actually the same. You may come to the same lunation counts by lowering an upper fingers and using 1 or 2 hands, but I don't believe they're all the same, because sign languages change just naturally as languages change. So I don't think they're all the same. But why would you have a lunar sign language? Well, as everybody in this group knows or recognizes, is that the months, as we know it, came from the word moon, and the months came from, in the ancient world, from the Romans. Before that, everybody used moons, and so if they to designate time and space, this gesture would suggest when let's meet in the moon when the ibex kids drop. So it's a gesture of time and space. In fact, maybe meet in this cave in that moon when the ibex kids drop. And you would do it in the exact same way as the San Bushmen did it, as the San Bushmen were using these for hunting, but maybe the San Bushmen also had abbreviated, two hands or some gesture to say that it's, the lion is doing something specific. So my suggestion is that these hand gestures, these marks are just not lunar time factor indicators, but they're also designate hand gestures in the absence of actual hand gesture stencils in the cave. And we can see with these, you kind of look at this, the El Castillo cave, going back, this panel goes back to about 27,000 years ago. And you can kind of look and see that these fingers are bent. Some of these are bent forwards. It's not just a big out flat hand, as Gorham would have interpreted it. And there's different shapes and ways that they're oriented. Okay. So going back to Alexander Marshak, who is one of my life heroes, he passed on probably about 4 years before I came out with Biological Time. Actually, it's actually the year before I came out with it, but he wouldn't have seen it. And I would have liked to have chatted with him and learned what his Biological Time was in 2004. But of course, it was ready there's a period of getting to that. But I would like to have chatted with him and learned what he did and what his impressions of, because this was far beyond what he imagined. He was looking for the suddenlies of how we came to have lunar counts. Now, there's another concept of this that ties into really all my work going forwards from this point. And that work going forwards was in about 2016. What we see in this image is we've got these deer crossing a stream, presumably with the Razier. They're dropping into a pool. We see the actual river. We see the lunar count. And what we do have here is an inner cave that is a reflection of the outer cave. So this is the underworld, and the outer cave has two elements. One is the terrestrial plane where we all live, and in the sky world. So this is when the artist created this image, the artist spiritually bridged three realms of the sky world, the terrestrial plane, and the underworld. And I believe this long before this was a dominant theme in art representation. And what this artist also did was they found the pareidolia of this image began by finding this pareidolia of this sort of stream-like dropping into a pool here. Then the artist, cleaned off the back and then drew in the heads of these deers and the lunation. So it began with, they found something outside of the cave, that the river and this dropping into a pool, saw a representation of it in the pareidolia of the cave. And then created the spiritual connection out of the light to bridge them all. And we, on this, I think I've heard on this in the series, theoretical Anthro series, that people talk about the world tree, and the world tree it's truly a worldwide concept where we have the sky world, we have the terrestrial plane, we have the underworld, and the roots. This is part of the human imagination. It's part of who we are. It's not just inherited from people before our time, from deep before our time, this concept, but also repeated in our works. So I'd say that much of this presentation is in my 2021 paper, Prehistoria. Prehistoria is a Hungarian European journal, and it was published in 2021. But really 90% of it, actually, I should say all of it was done before this time, because the Prehistoria paper there's nothing new, original. It was all the work that I had previously done. I sort of copied and pasted to put into this paper to meet the deadline, and that was okay with all the people involved. So I go back to 2004 on this, and additional work in the journals, and 2017 book Before Orion. But really, this was kind of a rehashing of the same stuff. And when the editor asked me, I was very polite. I said, I don't do this anymore. I did this a long time ago, and I've moved on to other stuff. And he says he really likes my work. And I said, okay, we're going to do this. And we did a really good job on it. We upgraded some of the images. Now, Daniel Borstein, I believe, is an American historian, wrote a book called The Discoverers. And he said that despite or because of its easy use as a measure of time, the moon proved to be a trap for a naive mankind. For while the phases of the moon were convenient worldwide cycles, which anybody could see, they were an attractive dead end. Now, of course, this is counter to what everybody who is on this program today, or has listened to any radical anthropologist programs in the past, is thinking, that we lost the moon. And the moon got caught up with all kinds of other words like lunacy and whatever, and werewolves and all this crazy sort of stuff. But it is what we lost the moon. And when we lost the moon, we lost our ability to connect with the animals in the world around us, such that the native indigenous peoples around the world retained in their calendars and still have many of their hunting and gathering traditions to this day. And more of my work can be found on my webpage and all these sort of places where everybody goes to. I'm out everywhere as Before Orion or Bernie Taylor, but I'm easily found. And by the way, this is She Who Watches Behind My Head. This is the Clubber Gorge. And I actually did some solar work on this, so sundial work, and this marks solar times of the year. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out of it. I'm going to get out of this. I'm going to close it, and then I'm going to stop sharing. And when I first encountered this group, it was really through the work of Camilla and Ian. And what struck me so deeply about their work was we came from 3 different directions. Mine was really the animals, and Camilla's was the women's space, and Ian's was the hunter. And we came presumably originally not knowing about each other's work, because I didn't know about your works. We came to the same place. This through 3 different directions, which is absolutely fascinating. And so that is a thumbs up for Ian and Camilla, and of course Chris Knight, who also does this mythology of the moon. And what your work is so fascinating to me is that I'm starting off the concept, this is about animals, and we're just another animal. But we're the animal that has a menstrual cycle that's in time with the moon. Therefore, we had the ability early on to have conscious recognition of time, whereas all the other animals have unconscious recognition of time by reacting to the light dark signals of the sun and the moon, and the weather perhaps too. So we're just another animal that just happened to be in sync. So then the other question is, well, why don't orangutans and mountain gorillas? How come they don't have it? Well, how do we know they don't have it? So there was a guest on a few weeks ago who was absolutely brilliant. I have complete respect for him, and I asked the question, and it was not something based on his answer, it was not something they were thinking about. So it appears that monkey people, I'm not sure the right word, but they're not anthropologists, they're not primatologists. Okay. The primatologists, this could be a whole new direction of primatologists to look at the rhythms of the animals, and to see first if the women are in sync, the females are in sync, and second, are they syncing around any phase of the moon, and then does there appear to be any conscious behavior moving through time and space related to the moon? Because it may be that they don't do it. It may be that we never actually looked if they were doing it. And that's possibly, so that's one of the considerations I've, but I would also say that we are, as conscious timekeepers, which we are differently from other animals, we could absolutely be alone in the cosmos, based on the way that we as I suggest, that we learn to tell time, consciously tell time, because you'd have to, if you project our experience out of the cosmos, you'd have to have some sort of relationship between the two that is consciously measurable. If the planet's got 2 moons or 3 moons or 4 moons, as many do, it's going to be a pretty crazy night. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Bernie. That very thought-provoking, jumping from the animals to the rock art, and incredible juxtapositions there. Really fascinating. That must have been Volker Sommer you were talking to about.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Volker and us, we did a big paper on reproductive synchrony, because reproductive synchrony is quite a big thing for primate scholars. There's been quite a lot of literature, and we were also considering the possibilities, comparative possibilities with Neanderthals as well. And the thing that strikes me about this, I mean, I'm very convinced about your decode on those lunations with the vernal equinox and the mares and the ibex and the aurochs. But why is it Homo sapiens, the Aurignacian Homo sapiens, are doing it, but the Neanderthals, they must have known this stuff too, but we don't see Neanderthals putting it on cave walls. And that's a fascinating part of it for me. Yeah,
Absolutely. So this takes us back to that 3 realms, and we have the red deer dropping down to the stream, into the river. There's a river. We have the same in the terrestrial plane. We have the same in the sky world. So what we came to this, it's not an actual recognition, but rather an imagination. We reached an imagination where we could say that you can have 3 realms of the cosmos, or this sort of spirituality between the 3. If you don't come to that imagination, because it's not a truth, it's not a reality, it's purely imagination. If you don't come to that point of imagination, why would you put anything in a cave? Because they already knew what was going on. They looked at the animals around them. They looked at the biological condition, the physical condition. They looked at the moon. They knew the vernal equinox. So before we didn't need to put it in the cave. We created a spiritual condition of putting it in the cave. So I would say that Neanderthals and other homos before Neanderthals, even Homo naledi, I'll put it out there, they already had this recognition about the lunar phases, and that they were able to manage themselves in time and space in the same way the Chukchi are doing it. That they lived in the rhythms of the animals. They were pastoralists before the concept of pastoralists was, because they were following the animals up in and out of the plains, up and down the mountains, based on the rhythms of the sun and the moon, and navigating perhaps by the stars. So it doesn't make Neanderthals any more or less, or make Homo sapiens any more intelligent by able to do this. We just have a different imagination. And how Neanderthals and Homo sapiens did obviously interbred, because 4% of people in Europe are Neanderthals. And so the menstrual cycles must have been about the same, very close. And so Chris Knight has his hand up.
Yep, Chris.
Well, before I sort of say anything, I've got quite a bit to say. Can I just ask a quite simple question? As you know, earlier, actually it was last year, wasn't it? There's a really big lot of publicity around the furniture conservator, Ben Bacon, who worked out why you have these dots, 4 dots or 5 dots on some of the animals. And it was taken up by Paul Pettit and others, and it became a huge story, as if the meaning of these dots and markings had been sort of discovered by Ben Bacon, when it seems to be that, I mean, obviously your approach is a bit different in so many ways, Bernie. You kind of got there first. So my question is, what is your relationship with said furniture conservator?
Interesting. Answer the question. So absolutely zero. I have no relationship to them, but about a year before they went to print back in January, they were in touch with a American public documentary producer, equivalent to the BBC. And the documentary producer looked at their stuff and said, "This is just like Bernie Taylor's stuff going back to 2004, because I have both copies of his books." And I received this as an email post, like 2 days after the Ben Bacon release. Okay, and I had no previous connection with this basically executive with BBC. And he said a few things. He said that first is Bernie already did this. He did 2004, wrote a book about this. And he said that you're just throwing out statistics out there. What Bernie has is he has the biological knowledge of the connections to these panels, and he has continuous indigenous use. He has all these calendars that the cars, just as I showed you today. Like I have, at this point, I probably like 40 or 50 calendars I could have thrown in this presentation. And he says he has the calendars. He says, we're not going to do anything with you guys unless you pull in these concepts that Bernie did back in 2004. Mm-hmm. So I had no connection with this producer equivalent of like BBC. And he said, we're not going to do a documentary with you guys. So a year before they went to print, they knew. They knew about, at least 1 year before they went to print, they knew about my work. And they did. And so the question is, did they not go with this producer because they didn't want to acknowledge my stuff? Or did they not want to acknowledge the current indigenous use and recent calendars? They're both wrong. They're both wrong. And what I've done, you saw this presentation today, is I've credited everything to indigenous calendars and current indigenous use, including Native Americans near to where I live, in both their rock art and their traditions and calendars. And it was about back in 2004, I was on US PBS, which is like BBC, and I was this concept was out in hundreds of newspapers in the US, and interviewed and all this sort of stuff. And I went to, I still didn't know how to reset the calendar. I couldn't tell you if the salmon were going to spawn in the first lunation after the winter solstice, or 5 days, the first lunation after 5 days after winter solstice. I didn't know how to do that, which was the whole point of this exercise, was never to work on Upper Paleolithic cave art. Never figured it out. So I went to the tribes, and I went to all the tribal councils of the Columbia River Basin. So these are mostly, at that time, they're mostly old men and old women. Okay, and I gave this presentation, and they cried. They just cried because they realized that they had it all along, and they had it in their traditions. And there's also about salmon, their traditions and their calendars and their mythology and their art. They had it all along, and it was taken away from them by European or originated schools, tribal schools, residential schools. And so I gave presentations to all the Fish and Wildlife agencies, the power companies, and everybody just said that the Indians had it all along. And so one of the tribal members said to me at council, or shared with me at council, he said, "We know there's other things we know, but if we tell you these things, you're going to go become famous and make a lot of money on them and not give us any credit." And I stood there and I realized that. And they gave, by the way, they just listed off a whole bunch of that happened to them, that basically their knowledge was stolen and used for medicines and things like that they had not compensated for. And so I realized, I said, it doesn't matter what I learned from them, from Indians, what I learned from Indian calendars, or what I learned on my own, whatever the order is, it doesn't matter. Is that the Indians had this all along. And so that going forwards, whenever I give a presentation, I'm not going to push myself as having discovered anything, because I didn't. Because if someone was in print before me, just as like I had these books in print before the Bacon story, it doesn't matter if they had it in their oral history. It doesn't matter if the ethnographers had it turn of the last century. They had it before. And it doesn't matter if it's on a teepee or it's in rock art in South Africa. It existed before. There's no such thing as rediscovering things. The Indians were here before the Europeans in North America. No one rediscovers anything. And when we learn that someone did this, we have to give the credit to where the credit was due. In the case of the equivalent of the BBC producer, he basically drew a line in the sand. He says, I know what the right thing to do here is. And when he came out with his news article, their paper, they included me in it. And so, which was, kudos to him. And now that you asked about the journal is a different question. So the editor of the journal had no concept of any of this work that ever existed before. And apparently his reviewers didn't know anything about it either. And I believe that, because this is not archaeology. This is ethnography. This is archaeoastronomy. These are areas that are outside of traditional, it's parts of anthropology. He had no idea. And so his issue then became, they put it out to the world, that the Dorian people put out to the world, they made this huge discovery. And he's got intellectual property issues, because they've stolen other people's work. They've stolen my work that was produced in print in a journal, and you can go back further back in time, all the people that stole the work that didn't credit. So the journal, the journal editor looked at the IP issue, because that's what they were concerned about, and they decided, well, we're not going to change anything. So I have made a complaint to the European Archaeological Association, the EAA, and said that there's two courses that the journal itself is not having truth in their publication, which you have to have truth in publication as part of the EAA to be a member, and that the editor either gets thrown out of the EAA, or he acknowledges prior to publication. And he can pick any of my works going back to 2004. And let's see what the EAA decides to do of all these smaller European countries.
Can I just read out? Can I just read out from the this piece in As It Happens? It just says here exactly what you say. It all began when Ben Bacon was poring through images of cave art and noticed that several different drawings of fish were accompanied by either 3 bars or 3 dots. Quote, I thought it must be a communication system of some sort, quotes, he said. Quote again, then I looked to see if anyone had actually figured out what these marks meant, and apparently they hadn't, which was a bit of a revelation. So no one ever figured anything out until they came along. I mean, what an absolute...
He saw my papers. He later acknowledged to have read my papers, to read my work.
How shameful, but of course...
What are these archaeologists like? But he's not even an archaeologist. He's being led astray by archaeologists.
People want to be famous. It's the 7 deadly sins.
Anyway, I just wanted to say one more thing, if I could. It's just that because you're a naturalist by background, it just does seem to me that you've missed out on a very, very important concept, important to social anthropology in general, to all social anthropology, including hunter-gatherer ethnography, but also particularly important to Ian Watts and Camilla, which is that whereas you kind of directly get from the moon and menstruation and the number 29.5 to sort of consciousness, Ian, Camilla, and all the rest of us, we have this concept called ritual. And so there's a ritual collective response to the moon, a behavioral response, which then in turn generates what we call collective representations of the head. So the sky, sort of earth, underworld structures and all those other structures are accurate maps to experiences you undergo through communal ritual. And so there's a mediation between the moon and people, which is this ritual mediation. And I just feel that it's not a criticism, it's just we all do different things, clearly. But I just think we all of us, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, we need to kind of you need to engage a bit more closely with each other's work and appreciate where we've all got to and sort of try to keep up to the mark with it. I find it quite hard, of course. I find it hard enough to keep up with Camilla's work and Ian's work, let alone that of other people, because it's all a bit complex. But I just want to say there's this fundamental concept developed by Emil Durkheim early in the last century, or the late 19th century actually, which is that shared representations, shared cosmologies, which what we call symbolic culture, doesn't doesn't, that kind of consciousness, as you call it, doesn't just get into the head from looking at things. You need, first of all, to have rituals, and the most fundamental of all rituals are initiation rituals, which are all to do with sex, with girls and boys coming of age and being initiated into the domain. And I just feel all of your work, everything you said, including what you just said this evening, would be, well, I don't know, be backed up really by introducing that concept, which is so important to indigenous people, of course. It's the rituals which keep the traditions alive, and actually the traditions are, they're not just mythicals. You know, the myths wouldn't make much sense without the rituals and the experiences that come through the rituals, which make those myths accurate to experience. It's the ritual experiences which are primary.
You're absolutely correct. And I started this doing statistics. I was collecting data. And biological time was 1/3 of cold text, 1/3 of appendices, and 1/3 of statistics. I had all the math, so nobody can argue with the math and see how it could be done. And then after I wrote that, said, I'm never going to write it. I wrote this book about statistics. I'm never going to do that again. And so I went on to write biological before Orion. 2017 it was released, and I started off saying that I'm not going to do any more statistics. I'm just going to quote, reference what I did in the past, and I'm also not going to do anything that was like spiritual, because I'm not a spiritual person, one could say. And then I started seeing images that, well, this is like what the Greeks interpret as a centaur, as a man, man and a horse connected. I said, well, that can't be real. And naturalists can't say there's a centaur because there isn't such thing. So I said, okay, I'm going to do spiritual stuff. I'm going to add it to the mix. But so I kept adding to the mix, and then I brought in the mythology and astronomy and many other areas. And I had seen the ritual stuff in the literature. So I had read Eliade, and all these ethnographers. They included it in their works. But it became complex, a very sort of complex, like Eliade shamanism, that you have so-called shamanism all around the world, and you have all these different rituals all around the world. So how do you? It would have been its own monster, and so I pick and chose the mythology, because it would have been volumes and young collected works but you're absolutely right in that it was there. I saw it to some degree, but I didn't integrate it because I was so far astray.
Brandon,
I'm talking about centaurs.
Can I just sort of, forgive me for interrupting? It's just that what we concluded was that the first ritual was extraordinarily simple. It's just women saying, "We're bleeding. That's it. Keep away. We're sacred." And they do it at the time when they were congregating together to keep safety in numbers from the lion. So every dark moon, women just, come together. Anyone menstruating would be kind of risky, partly because the males of the species, before we became morally human, would have been keen on running off with it, but also because of the blood. The carnivores can smell it. So I don't want to go into detail. We've written so much about it. It's just that I think you'd love the way we put it, because it does all those complexities you've talked about. We can get beyond them with a very parsimonious, very neat theoretical concept, which is just that at dark moon we all bleed. If we're not really bleeding, we at least share one another's blood or ochre. That means we're sacred. Some things are sacred, and we move between that world, the world of the sacred, and then come out at full moon into the other world, and go, betwixt and between, and everything else comes out of that. But you need first of all to sort of grasp the simplicity of it. And Bernie, honestly, I think you'd really like it if you read into it all. I think you suddenly find it's far more simple and elegant and beautiful than it's been, presented by other anthropologists who've been all over the place with these things. But
you're 100% correct. Yeah, I also read Camilla's papers, and it is the area that is my area I need to absorb. As I keep going on all these hominiledes, and it's
let's work out Homo sapiens first.
That's right.
Ledi.
Exactly.
Well,
there was no homileti.
There is a great deal of doubt about the Naledi stuff. But,
Manchego.
but just to add, well, just 1 minute to add for what you were saying, and then we've got to ask Manchego, because the great point about our model on the sex strike is women's blood is animals' blood, and it's that metaphor combining the women's blood and the animal's blood, which when the images are on the walls in those ways is implying that really the images are not just about animals, they're about women as well.
Yes. It's matriarchal. It's all about the women, and
it's the women. It's the women dancing. It's the women metamorphosing into animals in the course of their dancing.
Yes.
The women turn into animals.
Yeah, if we think of Peshmerga or somewhere, yeah.
Yes.
Manchego.
Yes.
Yeah, Manchego.
Yeah, that's a great talk, by the way. You mentioned just now you've come across centaurs. The earliest centaurs I know of are Cassite border. They're just marked borders because, that's what centaur is, something that's half in and half out. How far back are you finding them?
36,000 years, and found them in multiple caves. Wow. And so they're not centaurs per se. In fact, what they are is they're mares. They're mares, and so what I've been looking at is, for example, the gallery of discs has about 25 animals, and the animals could be either the female and her juvenile. There's only one male, which is a lion, which the hero battles with. The others are all females. And as the hero goes on his journey, he goes across the panel, he integrates with each of these animals. So he takes on the female essence of the animals, who are both protective and teach him how to run away or fly faster or whatever it is. So they're almost all the animals that he integrates with are female. And he battles with the lion, which becomes the Nemean lion story in Hercules mythology. So so he's not exactly a centaur. He takes on the essence of the horse, which is the mare, so he can run faster. Maybe he could smell things he otherwise couldn't smell. But he does this with a dolphin. He does this with many other animals to achieve on his journey. So in the Greek mythology, they saw these images and they made a centaur. They integrated the two. But they discombobulated what the Upper Paleolithic images were. What the Greeks did do is, on the hero's journey, he is assisted by female goddesses, and so the Greeks substituted the female animals in Upper Paleolithic cave art for the female goddesses. But yes, they're all, except for the lion he battles with, the hero integrates with them. And we know they're females because you actually see the body forms, or in the case of like raptors, they're associated with the juveniles, and the females who are, there's a mother giraffe who protects her young. In mother giraffe who protects her young, as a hero on his journey, his head overlaps with the juvenile who's being protected by the mother. So she's protecting him and teaches him, obviously, camouflage based on the image. But yes, so the Greeks had a different mentality, and they looked at the images and they took away what they wanted to see, which became the warrior centaurs. But in fact, it was the protective mother.
There's a chat from Vivian saying on the chat that she didn't get the how you explained the parallel between the boxes on some of those Cantabrian cave paintings, the boxes and the hand signs. I also needed a bit more. I'm not saying I wasn't convinced. It's just that I don't think I quite got what you're arguing. And
absolutely. Okay, so the boxes, I'm arguing that they're lunations, and they start with, you can see my hand up. The lunations start with the vernal equinox, or the dropping of the dropping of the young for the mare. Okay, and so you have 3 fingers. Okay, so this becomes the this becomes the first the lunation that's down. So then we have the mare. The next lunation is the next animal becomes the oryx, who drops her young. I'm sorry, the ibex, who drops her kid, and the next lunation. And so then it becomes like this. Okay, we go up again. The final lunation is when the aurochs drop their young, which is the third and the fourth lunation. Okay, and so actually it becomes dropping on the third. So it becomes like actually dropping on the third and fourth lunation. So the ears are up like this, and the aurochs. So ibex is the horns are up, and she drops her young in the second lunation, and after vernal equinox, and then in the case of the what does it have it? It's this way, dropping this way for the mares dropping. So what I do is I count across from the viewer's right to the left, and which is as the moon, moon travels across the sky, and I'm counting each lunation going that direction for the biological event of the animal as the cave artists marked it on those grids. And what's unique is that those three grids are next to each other. And so they're telling it's literally a calendar like we use today. It's going across time across three lunations. And so I propose that the grids are characteristic or descriptive of hand signals or hand signs for those animals, in the same way the San did it, and the same way people in the Plains Indians in North America, that they're descriptive of the heads and the antlers, the upward heads and the antlers. And I propose that Lawyer Gorham proposed that in caves where there's no hand gestures or hand signs, the animals are descriptive of those hand signs. And so, and the Lascaux cave has no known stencils, and so that they actually do have them, but they have them in the grids as opposed to hand stencils.
Then you wonder, why are they overt stencils in some caves, and in Lascaux it's kind of coded? It's kind of interesting why that would be.
Yeah, they're more complicated in Lascaux cave, because they have these marks in between, and some are longer than others. And I didn't go into it, but how the length of the lower and upper boxes does designate the fingers up, the length of the fingers up and down. So this is, if you have a long one, it's like this, and if it's a short one, it's like this. It goes like this. And by the way, astronomers do that today. This is how astronomers measure time and space. So this is not a new idea. I'm not going to say I invented that one either.
For more questions, we've got some rock art expert. We've got Ian here with the animals and lunar cycles and hunting, and Alicia. You've done work with Ojibwe people with rock art. Any thoughts? Any suggestions? Ideas to relate to it? Or anybody else who'd like to put something in?
Might be good for Ian, if you can, briefly, to just sort of, put into this discussion the nightstand lunar hunting, see whether that rings bells with some of the rock art. I don't know if you feel like it, Ian. Explain your concept, what you found, unless you're not there.
Okay, can have a go. Basically, I've always been primarily focused on the record of red ochre use as the best way to follow the evolution of ritual, assuming that the red ochre was primarily used in body painting in ritual performances. And we've known for a while that it seemed as if the sort of a shift from a very irregular pattern of use to a more habitual pattern of use seemed to tie in with our speciation in Africa at the end of the Middle Pleistocene.
Can you give dates for that, Ian? Because not everyone will know what that means.
Right. The end of the Middle Pleistocene, it ends at about 130,000 years ago. Now, timeframes have shifted over time, you know, in terms of scientific developments and dating and so on. But so anywhere from 300,000 until 130,000 is the late Middle Pleistocene. And that sort of more or less overlaps with the span of speciation. And the latest archaeological research is saying that ochre use only became habitual right at the end of that period, at around 160,000 years ago. Now, alongside this, we've also had an interest in lunar phase-locked hunting, because this was something that Chris was arguing for originally before we knew any of this back in the early 90s. And he wasn't predicting that this would apply to any extant hunter-gathering society. It was just part of his posited initial situation. So we were really very pleasantly surprised when Kristen Hawkes was presenting data from the Hadza in Eastern Africa in Tanzania, showing that their most productive form of hunting took place around the nights of full moon in the dry season. This was because in the dry season, the animals are forced to aggregate around the few remaining water holes. And it's not only that humans needed to avoid lions, and lions are dark moon hunters, but also they needed light in order to be able to see what they were aiming at. So that was those were the illumination constraints acting on hunters. And of course, the dry season is also a period of scarcity. So being able to procure regular supplies of fatty meat, or they're actually lean, so you actually need lots of animals to get a little bit of fat. But like we didn't pursue it until sort of fairly recently. And there's been some research done on spear technology, which was showing that early spears, going back 500,000 years, were probably primarily thrusting weapons. And so they'd be no good for nightstand hunting. You don't want to be that close to the animal. And that they don't acquire the attributes of the stone points don't acquire the attributes of a lance that you could throw at least 5 meters fairly accurately until within the last couple of 100,000 years. So it seems as if there seems to be some coincidence between the habitual ochre use and the ability of early modern humans to engage in this kind of hunting, this lunar phase-locked nightstand hunting. And of course, again, as Chris was saying earlier, as part of the model, the model was that women's rituals, ritual solidarity, their coalitionary solidarity around menstruation would be predicted at dark moon, partly to enable men to exploit natural light in their hunting activities. Originally, Chris thought this was just in terms of going for several days and nights away from a home base. But now it seems that, yes, it's that, but it's also the full moon hunting itself. So that, you know, it's on that kind of basis that then you can begin to sort of talk about African hunter-gatherer cosmologies as a starting point for and of course their ochre use as well, as a starting point, as a template that was taken with migrants who moved out of Africa in the last 100,000 years.
Well done, Ray. Well done.
It's interesting. I have a comment on that. That was actually, so I explored part of that concept from another direction. And there was a book written about instinct by, I believe it was UK, I forgot his name, but he won a Nobel Prize. And he studied this color red and as an instinctual response. And he stumbled across it, and he had 3 spine sticklebacks in a tank by the window. And every time a red delivery truck came by, the fish went into a defensive posture. And it's the study of instinct, I think was the book. And he's British because he has the red delivery truck, right? You know We don't have that US. And so he reasoned that the stickleback, this was a brainstem dominated response because sticklebacks can't think. Okay. And so if you look around the world, you can see McDonald's and all these stop signs. They're all red because they trigger an instinctual response of immediate danger awareness in the same way as it is for sticklebacks with a red delivery truck. And so Madison Avenue around the world, and going back before even there was a Madison Avenue, people had this concept in their advertising. So there's red is on the other end of the spectrum from it's red, yellow, green, blue. And so we live in a blue-green world, and red jumps out as an instinctual response. Now, what red also does, if you're a scuba diver or a snorkel or things like that, you're going to see a lot of fish that are red. And you think, well, why aren't these fish just, saying, hello, shark, I'm here? It's because those fish hide in the coral at nighttime, and red is the first color to become black, the first color to disappear. Okay. And so you might have the same sort of concept of using red as camouflage during the nighttime, in the same way as the coral reef fish do, and in recognition of what the sticklebacks do, because it's just saying, hello, I'm here during the day, whereas at nighttime, when presumably people were dropping their young, humans were dropping their young, it became camouflage. So that's it was called the power of instinct, or the study of instinct, but I believe he was British, and he won half the Nobel Prize.
Over to you, Ian.
Yeah.
Ian, do you want to say anything in response?
Yeah, I mean, of course, there are plenty of propositions as to why there would be evolved psychological bias for redness. That's not contentious. The issue is, how will any of those propositions engage with symbolic culture as we know it?
Mm-hmm.
And basically there are two arguments. It's either aggression, like the sticklebacks, that's if you follow the sort of male warfare argument, or it's to do with the salience related to menstruation as originally a cue of imminent fertility, which males would be very interested in, and that those females who are already pregnant or breastfeeding stood to lose out, and therefore they needed to co-opt that signal to share it around. That, in essence, is the core of the sort of sex strike theory. So it's not enough to sort of just posit a psychological universal. It's actually got to engage with things, with symbolic culture.
Or another way of putting it, or augmenting that, it's just that, Bernie, that salience, the sort of psychological salience of red as danger, has been there all along. And we need an explanation. Okay, why was it 160,000 years ago that suddenly Homo sapiens moved from sporadic, irregular use of ochre suddenly to every single ritual requires this ochre, and you've just got to have it. You've got to have it. It's the most
sure.
And all that. So, you know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's brilliant.
Okay, great. I mean, obviously, we want to convert you, just as you want us to be converted to yours. So you've already succeeded with your side of it, but it'd be nice if we can,
Came from the same place,
and we'd be stronger if we
ritually.
Yeah.
So it actually ties into the cave art as well. In that early cave art, you find a lot of red ochre, and you find. So I propose that we came from. I don't like the word civilization because it's how do you define it? But we come from very early imaginative origins. So people who made this earth, these three realms of, earth, underworld, terrestrial, and sky world, cosmoscape. And so we come from very early origins. So everybody around the world doesn't invent this, suddenly, as Marshak would have said. Rather, we go back to a very early time period where these were, and we inherit them over time. We inherited them, and part of the inheritance was supported by natural processes and psychological factors. And so I'm going to the concept of, I don't want to say root civilization, but these go back very early in time. The oldest art in European caves is red. So I'm going to say it's very early in time. That's my and reinforced or established by psychological. But yes, and that's why you'd see coming up some 100,000, 150,000 years ago. That was some common people diverged. They met with other people, because cave art is so different. Neanderthals didn't do it. Neanderthals lived at the same time as Homo sapiens, but they didn't do this because they perhaps didn't have that three realms interchange. And so there was maybe the imagination factor.
You need to read.
I'd say it's early.
You need to read Camilla and Ian's and Wilkes Summers' wonderful piece in Paleoanthropology. Was it 2015?
Camilla's going to send it to me.
I have sent or will send it. Yeah. Yes. And there's lots of questions coming up in the Zoom that people might. There's a suggestion about specularite from Jacob about the shining at night and reflecting the fire, which wouldn't necessarily be camouflage. There's also from Circa, there's cave art as a kind of library of the next generation, passing on knowledge about the lunar calendar, all kinds of stuff like that. And question Shakti asking, these are seasonal, repeated, observable phenomena. So what is the context for recording? Because people are making big efforts to put these images, I mean, these incredible artistic productions on Lascaux cave walls. What is the motivation for, that's my big question. What's the motivation for that? There's got to be something important there.
Yes.
Because Neanderthals would have known about it. They just didn't do that.
The act of creating the cave art is the cosmic connection between the underworld, the terrestrial, and the sky world.
But that's
the act of creating.
Why, Bernie? Sorry to interrupt. You may very well be right on that, but why are they doing it? What are the social motivations for it?
Oh, the social motivations for it. Well, the Catholic priest stands at the altar and he does the same thing. He says the same things. So it becomes a spiritual leader status. Wow. So that's the motivation for actually doing it. But the reason why they do it is that it's that symbolic moment, bringing the three realms. And the places we find this cave art.
Forgive me, hunting-gathering societies are a different kettle of fish from patriarchal Catholic societies.
Okay, I agree.
The patriarchal Catholics that destroyed the calendars of the hunter-gatherers, if you don't mind. Yeah. So.
I would say that the patriarchal Catholics draw from these much earlier traditions.
Well, that's
so
true.
They changed it in the power structure, but everything goes back to these much earlier traditions. You can see my work on constellational stellar astronomy. The ancient Greeks literally lifted half of their constellations in the same animals, in the same order, in the same direction into their record, and the other half came from two other places. But we're not inventing very much besides iPads. We're not discovering very much besides more distant stars. We're rehashing the same psychological, biological
true
inputs that we've had for millions of years. But what makes us different,
I don't know about millions. It's a bit.
What makes us different, with Homo sapiens different from chimpanzees, but not different from Neanderthals and maybe not Naledi and not Homo erectus, is that we consciously established our place in time and space. That we could think ahead by having these calendars. We didn't need to record them in caves because we could just follow around we could do what the Chukchi did. We can do what the Thompsonians. We could have this knowledge within our culture and rituals and stories and mythology. We can have it in traditional practices without having the art or having the record in the books, one could say. You didn't need it.
Yeah, is Alicia, go ahead.
Alicia, let's hear from you.
Yeah, I'm just sort of, I was thinking and arguing. So you arguing, or as in, you're saying that that paintings would have been painted at a certain time of the year and a certain type of the calendar. Is that the sort of logic that you're going in?
Well, I would say that they are either painted at that time of year or they reflect that time of year. And this is the reason why. I explain this why. Is that so some of these paintings represent places that are not near the caves. Okay. And so if they couldn't do them they couldn't be at that place at this mountain and looking at such and such pareidolia and make them at the same time in the cave. And so it is that cosmic connection when they're at the original place on terrestrial world. It's also the cosmic connection when they recreate it in the underworld of the caves. So that they can have two things at the same. They can have the same thing at two different times by having it in the cave. And then what they do is, so the original was to create this three realm connection. And then they brought apprentices in. And the apprentices, what I propose is that they looked at them and they had to pass the test. They had to figure out what is this image really all about. And in most of these images, there's some sort of distractor, and often red is a distractor, okay? And that there's an image behind the red, or there's some sort of bold lines in blue, and then there's an image behind the bold lines in blue. And most people will look at the blue and the red, they'll get distracted by that, but miss the engravings in the limestone behind them. And so that was the next stage of it, was they were testing apprentices. Could they see, the forest, the trees through the forest? Because if you couldn't see the trees through the forest, you couldn't keep the mythology, you couldn't keep the ritual, the traditions that guided your entire clan for the eternity of their being. So the first step was that connection, the ritual, the connection, the same way as we do today in religious practices, okay? And not just Muslims and Catholics, and everybody does that cosmic connection. The Chinese, of course, and Tiananmen, this cosmic connection. But then they created it. Then they used it to teach, instruct, and have a record for the apprentices. Because these are pretty small. These are small clans of people. You might have had 20 or 30 people, and they probably had one apprentice. If the teacher and the apprentice die, what do? You have to have some kind of a record to carry these things on into the future. So are they books? We could say it that way. Books of knowledge, absolutely. One of the questions was like a book of knowledge. So absolutely, but that wasn't the reason they made them. They made them to commemorate that cosmic moment, that time of the beginning. Whether the beginning be of the dropping of the foal from the mare, be the cosmic egg, which is depicted these things. They depict original stories.
You're still not using the word ritual, but anyway.
Okay, I'm gonna use the word ritual. Okay.
Well, Alicia, do you want to say any more? Or?
Oh no, I was just sort of asking because I've been finishing writing up a paper which I'm working on with an elder from a northern community, and he's given me 2 recipes for paint. And one is from his community, and one is from another one about 200 kilometers away. So
I didn't catch which community.
Oh, Laxall. One is from Laxall, and one is from Eagle Lake, and they're quite close by, like 200-300 kilometers. So we could drive it quickly. The point is,
Canada.
Yeah, it's in Canada, northern Canada. The Laxall is on the 50th parallel, so it's about 7 hours drive straight north from Thunder Bay, which is on the north shore of Lake Superior. So, and they're saying that there are different ingredients in the recipe which will tie it into the time. You can argue they're tied into the time when the painting would have been made. So if you look at the ingredients, they have things like eggs. That tells you something about the time of year, which was why I was asking you, okay, you're talking about certain events happening with different animals. They only happen at certain times of the year. So if you're going to make a leap and stretch it to the animal, to the paintings, I mean, are you thinking, are you coming out and saying, yes, these paintings are made at certain times of the year? Because I would have to say based upon the evidence I've got from this elders, yes, the paintings are being made at a certain time of year based upon the availability of the ingredients.
Yes, and that ingredients then drives the ritual.
Brilliant. Brilliant
So
insight.
yes, I'm in agreement with you.
Yeah, that seems like a
completely
lovely
agree.
connection. We are going to we're getting people leaving now. I think we're going to have to wrap up unless we've got some. You want to say any more from either of you?
Let's quit. Yep.
Thank you.
This is before we just say goodbye and thank you so much to Bernie. This is our last session of these Tuesday talks until we come back at the autumn equinox, the Tuesday of the autumn equinox in September, and we should be in UCL live again, I hope, as well as on Zoom. So I hope people will come back and rejoin. Keep in touch through Eventbrite. We've also got Facebook, Twitter, and Mastodon. I was very pleased to see people are picking that up. One other thing, though, is we do have one last event on Saturday, June 24th, and I put the Eventbrite link. That event is with Chris Knight and Morna Finnegan, talking about language and laughter. So it's talking about the relationship between language and laughter in human evolution, the origins of language. It should be a very nice.
Oh dear, Camilla seems to have gone. So I think you've all got the details. It's me and Mona, and Camilla's put it down there, and it's on Zoom, and it's June the 24th. And unless Camilla suddenly moves from the land of the dead back to the land of the living, miraculously, I think I better close. Someone's going to do it. So anyway, thanks ever so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
That
thanks.
was so good. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah, I'm going to press the little button which says end. Bye, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
See you next term.
See you next time. Bye.